Start off my channel. I'm DJ Black Guy in here for the first time. Hit that like button, subscribe button. So, Mandalorian episode 5 was a good one last. Um, Episode had a lot of action in it, some revelations in it, and apparently had a lot of Easter eggs that I did not know about because like Star Wars and I'm a noob when Star Wars or so. Learning as I go. But talked to some guys last night. There was some big cameos in there, so I figure we'll watch the breakdown from the new rock stars to see what I missed and everything. But really enjoyed the episode last night. Basically started off with I can't remember the black dude's name. He's like the mayor of the new place. The pirates come back and basically, kind of take over the place. Um, the one Asian X-Wing pilot shows up and there's like a distress call out for the planet and he wants to help out and but the government they're like ignoring it and everything. The one bad chick, she shows up again, the one that killed the last guy with the glasses. Um, the X-wing pilot ends up going where the Mandalorians are and say, "Hey, look, they need help. Your buddy, help them." Mandalorians go back. They help liberate that place, and at the end, Armorer basically tells Bo-Katan that since you saw the I can't say that. You are kind of like the chosen one to unite all the Mandalorians, and because she can take her helmet off, she can walk between both worlds and bring all the Mandalorians back, so they can retake Mandalorian. At the end of the episode, we find out that Moff Gideon actually escaped, and there's evidence of Beskar armor, which is kind of implementing that the Mandalorians were involved in his jailbreak. That's a brief rundown. Let's go to Mr. Eric Voss right now and check out all the Easter eggs and stuff that this Star Wars knew.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of The Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 5, Chapter 21, The Pirate. From the Orbesh on Zeb's vest to how those pilots' billiards game as a deep cut to A New Hope. Sound effects were used from Return of the Jedi, and coming back to Zeb here, hidden details in his VFX design that make him look so good. Let's break down this scene by scene for every last Star Wars
watching
Easter
Clone
egg,
Wars and Rebels
detail that you might have missed. And they open on the pristine gates of Navarro. These were in ruins in Season 1, so now their repairs this season were a big deal until this episode. The statue of IG-11 in the plaza remains disassembled from Din and Greef's attempt to reboot him with the Anzellans in Chapter 17. And since Din was unable to find a new chip, they really seem to have dropped this. But we'll see if IG-11 comes back in these final few episodes. Greef Karga's city map labels 3 spots in Orbesh: on the left, East Court; in the middle, Pole Cushion; and on the right, Landing Yard. But this planning session gets interrupted when Greef looks down at the plaza to see a shadow moving across the yard. And for a second, we think it's an Imperial Star Destroyer, but it's actually Gorian Shard's Cumulus class Corsair battleship. The name Corsair comes from Legends, the 2005 Dark Lords of the Sith comic from Dark Horse. The Corsair was a Daraphin class Sith battleship with Sith crystals that could tear out the core of a star. The design of this ship does pay homage
I have read it on the books. I don't know
like
all
a
the
bottle
lore.
opener or the beak of a bird digging for prey. The Cumulus class takes its name from the cumulus clouds. Those are the white puffy types of clouds that fill the sky. Now this ship's hull seems to be painted
I was a meteorologist in the Marine Corps.
design. You ain't exactly camouflaging yourself if you're that big up over a city, but does give it the militaristic look, like a tank that is painted that way. In the history of its Corsair name and the looming shadow visual of its cumulousness, it just gives this pirate ship an imperial vibe. As Carson Teva later explains, this pirate activity gives him a bad feeling about this when it comes to the rising threat of the First Order. Just seems like the pirate nation is being manipulated to chip away at the New Republic and to keep them distracted. Gorian Shard is the pirate king we met briefly in Chapter 17, played by Nonzo Inozi from Game of Thrones, and keeping in with the pirate tradition, he's like Davy Jones, or I guess in this case a greenbeard take on Redbeard or Blackbeard. Greef connects to the call with him, and I like how he takes a moment to steady himself and assume a commanding pose, you know, like we all do before signing into Zoom meetings. But Gorian Shard's holo projection is set to huge, so he ends up just taking a higher status in this negotiation. And I love it. As Gorian talks, Greef's bust, which has been restored from Chapter 17, it's now in the background, and it starts outside of the frame of Gorian's holo projection, but moves closer and closer to his mouth, showing how Gorian is devouring Greef's interests here. Gorian scolds Greef about shooting his helmsman, and Greef says,
"He shot first.
It's a great nod to the famous Han and Greedo shootout in A New Hope, where
Yeah.
Han shot first in the original version, but George Lucas changed it for the 1997 special edition so that Greedo shot first, leading to the who shot first, Han shot first debate among fans.
I know that.
Grief bluffs that he's under the protection of the New Republic, and Gorian just laughs that Navarro is an independent system, which, to be fair, is independence that Grief told Mando that he wanted in Chapter 17 after they both talked shit about the New Republic. He's really reaping what he sowed. Gorian says, "This isn't
Not a
support.
protection
You
of
can't bluff your way out of this one, Karga," referring to the in-universe card game played by Han Solo in Lando Calrissian. Gorian rains cannon fire down on Navarro like, oh, say, Thrawn upon Lothal and Rebels, creating a lifelong enemy in Ezra
Yeah, I've heard
Bridger.
about
I think
Thrawn.
this is going to come back up in the next few episodes as this series pivots to set up Ahsoka. After the initial bombardment,
I need to watch
those.
those,
Already
I get
reduced back to Rebel. The episode's title
deeper
of
into
The
Star Wars
Pirate
stuff.
cuts to a tropical cove that looks like the kind of place a traditional pirate would plunder. But instead of a sea shanty sung by Barbosa, the closed captioning lists this music as psychedelic rock music playing, which is just incredible. And I love the vocalization here. It reminds me of the absolute
What are they
jam
saying?
that we heard as we soared into Niamos on Andor. Remember that?
Oh yeah. Get it.
We see an X-Wing departing this cove as a Y-Wing lands in a landing yard alongside several other Y-Wings, but they look a bit more sparse and less equipped than when we saw them in Return of the Jedi. Remember Chapter 19? We learned that the New Republic is still in the process of decommissioning the Rebel Alliance fleet. Inside there are X-Wing and Y-Wing pilots in orange and in blue. Now the Blue Squadron was supposed to be decommissioned after the Battle of Scarif, but perhaps the New Republic era has brought them back. If you watch Rogue One closely, the Ghost was among that fleet in the Battle of Scarif. Zeb might have been there. That might be why Zeb is now part of this Blue Squadron. We see a few pilots playing
I don't know
a
anything about
billiards
that.
game. This was from a removed scene from the 1977 Star Wars. This same game was played at the Toshi station. That was the same station that we visited in the pilot of the Book of Boba Fett. The teal drink they're drinking is Spotchka. That's the in-universe booze characters have been drinking in The Mandalorian, like in the bar in Mos Pelgo, and Fennec Shand and Boba Fett were drinking some when they took Jabba's throne from Bib Fortuna. Above the bar are various trophies of helmets and droid heads, like the opening chrome-faced intro sequence of every episode. You can see an Imperial probe droid. That's interesting. Also an Imperial mouse droid, an RA-7 protocol droid head. There's some brown stormtrooper helmets, a black Imperial pilot helmet, scout trooper helmets, and behind the bar, the drink kegs are the same prop design from the Mos Eisley Cantina in A New Hope that would later be repurposed as the prop of the IG assassin droid head. Sitting at the far end of the bar in the foreground, three big cameos, directors and producers of the series: Dave Filoni, who plays Trapper Wolf, Rick Famuyiwa, who plays Jib Dodger. Jib Dodger is probably a joke to like a jib on a set that Rick Famuyiwa might have been hit on the head with at some point. Jib Dodger. And then Deborah Chow, Sash Ketter. We saw these New Republic X-Wing pilots at the end of Chapter 6 in Season 1. And since then, Famuyiwa has now been promoted to executive producer alongside Dave Filoni and John Favreau. And yeah, Dave Filoni wears his iconic wide-brimmed hat, which I'm pretty sure is just glued to his head, like Kevin Feige's.
Yeah, I didn't catch any of that in the
episode. Bartender is played by Misty Rosas, who did the physical work of the Ugnaught Kuil in Season 1. We catch up with Captain Carson Teva, the great Paul Sun Hyung Lee, who wears a sick pilot jacket with patches, including one with the Rebel insignia on the sleeve and an orange patch with the freaking Rancor. Is he part of the Rancor Squadron? Awesome! There's also a blue and red patch that
I need to
refer
watch
his
Rebels
home
and Clone
planet
Wars
of
to get
Adelphi.
out bigger,
Seriously, my birthday is
understanding
next
everything.
week on April 7th, and since I can't go to Star
If
Wars
you guys got
Celebration,
any
it's all
suggestions
the way
which one I
to
should
the UK.
watch
If anyone wants
first,
to get me
let
one
me
of
know.
these
Should it be
jackets,
Rebels or
I'll wear
Clone
XL,
Wars?
and I'll want that. Joining him is Zeb from Rebels, voiced by Stephen Bloom as he is in the show.
This is the guy everybody's talking
Zeb,
about.
or Garazeb Aurelios, joined Harrison Dula, Kanan Jarrus, Ezra Bridger, Sabine Wren, and that little Chopper on the Ghost, and he will be the fourth character to show up in live action from the crew of the Ghost in the upcoming Ahsoka series, alongside Harrison Dula, Sabine Wren, and Ezra Bridger. And the fact that he shows up now in this New Republic pilot bar tells us that Hera will likely soon be introduced for this Ahsoka series. I did see the Ahsoka teaser at last year's celebration, and we do see that Twi'lek head from behind. His flight vest is stamped with Orbesh. That's hard to translate at first, but that's because it's upside down so that the pilot would be able to look down at his chest and read it. And it translates to pull to inflate. So our man Zeb is pulling a Marty McFly and wearing a life preserver in case his Y-Wing ever crash landed in the water. The VFX work on Zeb is just so good, and it's all in the details. Like, look closely at his face on this line.
Request permission to intercede. They haven't returned a dispatch in weeks. is swamped.
Yeah, the frequent blinking, the way his nose wrinkles, and his
That's
temple
pretty cool.
twitches as he
Wow,
awkwardly has to remind his buddy how
detail.
hopeless this is. Just a few subtle gestures, along with the limited screen time and the well-matched naturalistic lighting, and yeah, that worn-down, upside-down Orbesh. All these details work together to make it feel like the guy is sitting
Yeah,
here
I'm
with
learning a lot
us.
this
And I'm not
time.
afraid to say it. On Disney Plus, Lucasfilm has much better VFX than Marvel does, and I believe it's because Lucasfilm's animators work in-house, and these folks grew up with the animated versions of these characters and have spent their entire lives dreaming about bringing them into live action. Whereas
Makes
Marvel
sense.
tends to outsource their VFX, and they pit these companies against each other, they work them to the bone, and all that creative exhaustion ends up showing. And Seb says,
Good luck. You're gonna need it.
using the same intonation as Han Solo to Lando in Return of the Jedi.
Good luck. You're gonna need it.
So Teva goes to the New Republic building on Coruscant and meets with Colonel Tuttle, Tim Meadows.
Tim Meadows,
That yellow
I was
astromech
surprised.
droid is the same one who visited Dr. Pershing's desk in Chapter 19, and the hard discs on that tray are the same prop design as the disc with the Death Star plans that was handed to Leia at the end of Rogue One. In fact, Grief Karga initially recording this message does feel a lot like Leia recording the message and handing it to R2-D2. Elia Kane comes back and she butts in to mention that Navarro never actually
This
signed the
chick.
New Republic Charter. The New Republic Charter! This is actually brought up in Claudia Gray's Bloodline as a kind of constitution that outlines the role of positions like Chancellor and First Senator. Kuil actually brought it up in Chapter 7, referring to the whole Finders Keepers clause of him now being able to claim IG-11's body himself.
And stated as my own in accordance with the Charter of the New Republic.
Teva notices the amnesty program badge on Kane's uniform, which is an Orbesh A, and this scene quotes New Rockstars.
These events could all be connected.
I think that's a bit of a leap.
Kane uses this as an example of why Navarro should learn to sign the charter, and Teva says by letting them suffer, and Kane smiles. Yeah, it's a performative gesture to show that she's not taking it personally, but also she didn't really have to hide a smile because she loves watching people suffer. Like
Yeah.
notice how she says it often
Caught it
takes a
go.
new perspective before one can see the light, which totally feels like she's internally picturing Dr. Pershing seeing the colorful lights that she used to torture him. Teva says that she didn't see the light, she was captured, which is basically this show's version of
You're talking about your court-ordered community service?
I don't need a judge to tell me to keep my community clean.
But he did, right?
Teva senses it is all headed toward the First Order, saying there's something happening out there. All these events, it's not a coincidence. And before it becomes too big for the knack, it'll be too late. Captain Teva tracks down the Mandalorian covert, saying one of them served with him in the rebellion and snitched. And it was R5-D4. Remember, Pelimoto reminded us in Chapter
snitch.
18 that R5 did serve the rebellion, which I had thought referred
That's
to
true.
that certain point of view story when R5 intentionally blew his motivator so that R2 could go with Luke, but I guess there was more history there. The fuel meter! Din hears Teva's request to help Grief, and he makes his case to the rest of the covert, carrying the armorer's hammer as a kind of talking stick. I love the way
Yeah.
they repurpose it from a forging tool to a speaker's gavel. Din acknowledges that many of these guys once fought Grief in Chapter 3 of the series, and Din declares, perhaps it is time for us to live in the light once again, a place where we are welcome so that our culture may flourish and our children may feel what it is to play in the sunlight. And I love how Grogu smiles at that because our boy just wants to play. But Din
Yep.
is subtly redefining what it means to be a Mandalorian, because some would say it's really their culture to be shielded from the sunlight by always having to wear their helmets. But I love how later in this episode, the armorer will see this light when Bo-Katan is framed in a beam of sunlight and is told to remove her helmet. And I like how Paz Vizsla doesn't just rise up to just signal to Din that he's on his side. He only speaks because he heard all those nervous
Yeah.
murmurs, and he knows that Din needed him to win.
And I like-
over
I like
even
how
on
he
the
started
fence. By
off-
starting the speech with the antithesis, he smartly gets the attention of the
Yeah.
detractors until he reframes his whole argument as reasons why.
I
to
like how he
save
did
Grief.
that.
Because we are Mandalorians.
I thought he could be
Rhetorically,
against him,
this
but
is the
like
same tactic
he owed him
McConaughey's
because
character uses in A Time to Kill, explaining why
he
Samuel
did
L.
that because
Jackson
he
was
said his
justified
son
in killing
too.
the Klansman who raped his daughter by telling the jury to imagine what happened to the girl with vivid detail, and then closes with, "I want you to picture that little girl. And now imagine she's white." Now I guess it's not as artful or as powerful of a speech here.
That's a
but
good
you
movie,
get
by the way.
idea. Paz says that Bo-Katan didn't give up on my son's life even when the rest of us did, signaling
Yeah.
that even he gave up a bit on his son's survival prospects.
Well,
As
he said
Bo-Katan
it, they always
shows
took
them
the
her
kids
Comrade
and
class
never saw 'em
fighter
again.
transport, she faces the shoulder that bears the Mythostar signet on that
Ah.
new armor piece of the armor just cast for her last episode, appealing to the thing that unites all of them instead of turning to show her Night Owl history that actually broke off from the Death Watch that these guys are derived from. They exit hyperspace, and the planet of Navarro zips in at them, a visual that will always look so rad to me. And we see how these drunken pirates have now overtaken Navarro. A poor astromech droid just bumping into the
Assholes.
rubble until he sparks, just offing himself because he hates it here. It really is like these pirates are drunkenly singing, Yo ho, yo ho, a pirate's life for me, as they've overtaken Isla Tesoro. And you know, that ride seems like it's all fun and games, but we forget how those people's lives were ruined. Those pirates execute the mayor by drowning him in a well. They abuse the donkey. It's not okay. And here we see how that includes them retaking the school that Vane wanted to get drunk in before.
Oh,
you can see
yeah, I
that same
forgot about that.
starboard that the protocol droid used in chapter 12 while Grogu was eating those blue cookies. Gorian Shard has a first mate with a striped shirt and red bandana who's clearly modeled to look like Smee from Peter Pan.
I didn't think about
Peter
that.
Pan and Star Wars. That ain't Star Wars, bro. Greef radios to Mando that they got him outnumbered 10-1, and Mando tricks one snub fighter to crash into another and says, I like those odds. A nod to Han Solo again.
Sir, the possibility of successfully navigating an asteroid field is approximately 3,720 to 1.
Never tell me the odds.
Bo-Katan drops the first wave to clear the street, and the
I like
Anzellans
that.
say, everybody come and look! After those Kawaki monkey lizards got shot by the pirates earlier, now one points to the plaza to warn the Mandalorians, telling us that these things are far smarter than we realized, and just makes it kind of disturbing that Jawas were roasting them on spits in the pilot episode.
Oh, yeah.
Paz lays down some heavy repeating blaster fire, but they get bogged down by a Trandoshan pirate with a cannon in Greef's suite. Meanwhile, up above, Din's N1 sends a stump fighter into the Corsair, and Gorian Shard shouts, Dang Ferric! You know, the recurring Star Wars profanity.
Think Ferric.
The armorer gets into the
I'm
suite
sorry
and
saying
shows that
that.
fortune hammers ain't just for taking turns to speak. She clubs them one by one and uses
I mean,
her
hammer
toes
went-
to
the armor went
pinch
off,
a
man.
spinal column. Youch! It's like old man Marley taking out the wet bandits. Gorian refuses to retreat, saying he'll do it in a puffer pig's eye. Puffer pigs are creatures that sniff out minerals that we saw in Rebels. Din and Bo-Katan are able to bring down the Corsair. This is the same sound effect made by the Star Destroyer that crashes into the Death Star in Return of the Jedi. Now this slams into the side of an active volcano, and we see the ground quake. It's a seismic event that I would be nervous around anywhere with
Yeah.
hot springs and active lava flows, but it doesn't matter. They all cheer, and we hear those Anzellans shout, It's gonna be okay! Which is something I'm just gonna start cheering whenever I'm excited, because that's all we can really hope for, right? That it's just gonna be okay.
Yeah,
Now,
right.
in this cheering crowd, I love what I call extra extras. Like this super psyched out person in front of the N1, because if you've ever been on a production set, for sound purposes, extras often have to emote and cheer silently, and they'll fill in the sound effect later during the dubbing process. So this person is just really screaming silently here.
Thank you.
Greef declares that the territory from the lava flats to Bullock Canyon will go to the Mandalorians. This is a wonderful nod to Jeremy Bullock, who died relatively recently, and he played the physical performance of Boba Fett in the original trilogy.
Oh, wow.
Between this and Ahmed Best last week, I really like how they're showing their love to the cast. Paz escorts Bo-Katan
The
back to the
respect, man, the
sewers where they
respect.
once hid, and we hear Ludwig Göransson's moody electric guitar strings from the pilot episode.
Like that.
Bo-Katan and the armor recall the Great Forge of Mandalore. The armor says it was large and ornate, and the air rang with the music of 100 hammers. To her, hammering is music. As in Chapter 17, the strikes of the hammer were synced with Joseph Shirley's drum music. Their armor compares the Great Forge to this simple one. Now, both serve the same purpose. She's coming to terms with the fact that the ornate ceremonial trappings of the Mandalorian's past are not the way for the future of the Mandalorian people.
Yeah.
And that open-minded tolerance will attract greater numbers. That is why she tells Bo to remove her helmet. Not to trap her, but to allow her to be a
Yeah, I thought she was
Mandalorian in
tricking her
own
for
way,
something.
trusting that the mythosaur presenting itself to her was a more valid sign and portent. The armorer says, I was taught that the mythosaur existed only in legends, and yet you saw it. It is a sign that the next age is upon us. Yes, the phrase only in legends, another double meaning, as much of what we know about the mythosaur really comes from legends or expanded universe literature. The armorer joins a helmetless
yeah.
Bo-Katan, saying that she walks in both worlds and can bring all tribes together. Paz Vizsla turns to Din Djarin uncertain, as the two of them previously dueled over this question of over being an apostate. So when the armorer pledges to retake Mandalore, I don't think it's a false plot to set up Bo-Katan to fail again. The drum music swells with pride. It casts her at the end of a redemption arc. But my question to you is, does this redemption feel earned to you as a viewer? Isn't it a bit odd for the armorer to take Bo-Katan at her word when it comes to seeing the mythosaur? And wasn't it Din and Paz who really gave better speeches here and did more to win this battle?
Yeah, right.
Like, don't get me wrong, I really like Bo-Katan. I think she could be a great leader. It just feels like the armorer is weirdly rushed and eager to embrace her. Like she automatically baptized her. She breaks the helmet rules for her. In fact, I'm now half wondering if the armorer might secretly be Bo-Katan's sister Satine, who somehow survived. Somehow Satine returned.
I
You know, it's
thought it would
crazy.
be like her
It's my
relative or
Matt Shepard
something.
theory. In fact, I hope it's wrong. If this ends up being the case, I'll be kind of mad. Carson Teva ends this episode coming upon the Ghost ship, a New Republic
This was
Lambda-class
interesting.
shuttle. Its hull breached. Lieutenant Reed, who he radios with, is, as before, played by Max Lloyd Jones, who is a stand-in double for the DH Luke Skywalker in Chapter 16. The Astromech probe scans the shuttle with an eerie planar beam that looks exactly like the light in James Cameron's Aliens when Ripley is found in cryosleep.
I thought
Now,
that,
remember,
yeah,
Dave
that's what
Parker told
reminded
us in
me
Chapter
of.
17 that Moff Gideon was escorted personally by Cara Dune, who he said then went off to join another division. But I guess it is possible that one of the corpses in the shuttle could be Cara Dune, and that, like Gucci, Cara
kill
Dune
her
died
off?
on the way back to her home planet. He notices a chunk of Beskar alloy in the wall. He assumes Mandalorians did this. Now, despite the fact that there are other Mandalorian tribes out there, some may be more vengeful, I just don't think Mandalorians did this, because Mandalorians would have just killed Gideon instead of extracting him and kidnapping him, and I don't think any Mandalorian would leave any Beskar behind. Mandalorians just aren't that sloppy when it comes to their Beskar. So I think this was whoever bombed Bo-Katan's home. Someone framing the Mandalorians. Someone actively hostile to the Mandalorians. Perhaps Thrawn, who might be trying to frame or trying to aggravate Sabine Wren, who is a Mandalorian from Cronest. Next episode's supposed to be a big one. I think we're gonna see Thrawn in it, and I believe Grand Admiral Thrawn could prove to be the ultimate pirate of this episode's title. Hey, a reminder to subscribe to our new channel, The Deep Dive, and support us by grabbing some merch at nerdriot.com.
Yeah, so I'm not too familiar with Thrawn. I've heard about him. I remember last season they were talking about him, and people were expecting when the planet that Ahsoka was on, they expected him to be charged for that, but that never happened. Again, I need to watch Rebels. I need to watch Clone Wars to get a better understanding of this. I will be. Yeah, I'm a Star Wars noob, but still loving it. Let me know what you think of Mandalorian. You've been watching it. You think it's the best thing on Disney Plus right now? Because I sure do. Yeah, leave your thoughts down below. Leave a comment. Till next time, guys. I will see you when I see you. Peace.